The galaxy was vast, a swirling expanse of stars and nebulae that stretched endlessly into the void. Humanity had carved out its place among the cosmos, not through diplomacy or peaceful exploration, but through sheer determination and force. Captain Cal Draven stood at the helm of his starship, the Eclipse Vanguard, gazing out at the endless blackness outside the viewport. His sharp gray eyes reflected both wariness and resolve. He was no stranger to war. Years spent fighting slavers, pirates, and hostile alien factions had hardened him. Yet there was something about tonight's mission that felt different, unsettling. Cal's orders were clear: infiltrate an illegal trade outpost orbiting a dying moon and dismantle it. Intelligence reports suggested the slavers operating there dealt in contraband goods, weapons, and worse, sentient beings. It wasn't uncommon for entire species to vanish overnight, only to reappear as slaves on distant worlds. But this time, Cal couldn't shake the feeling that he'd uncover more than just stolen cargo. As the Eclipse Vanguard approached the outpost, cloaked under layers of stealth technology, Cal assembled his strike team. They were a small group, handpicked for their skill and loyalty. Among them was Lieutenant Maravos, a quick-witted engineer with a knack for hacking alien systems, and Corporal Jace Rin, whose brute strength made him invaluable during close combat. Together, they prepared to breach the enemy stronghold. "Stay sharp," Cal said, his voice calm but firm. "We move fast, hit hard, and get out before reinforcements arrive." The infiltration went smoothly, at first. The slavers, complacent behind their shields and automated defenses, never saw the humans coming. Cal led the charge, his plasma rifle blazing as he cut down guards stationed along the corridors. Their screams echoed through the metallic halls, but Cal didn't hesitate. Slavers deserved no mercy, not after what they did to innocent lives. It was deep within the heart of the facility that Cal found her. Hidden away in a dimly lit chamber, chained to the wall like an animal, was a young alien girl. Her body shimmered faintly with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed softly in hues of blue and green. She looked frail, her skin pale and marked with bruises, but her wide, luminous eyes burned with a quiet defiance. Cal froze for a moment, taking in the sight. He had heard rumors of her kind. The Luminary, a mysterious race said to possess extraordinary abilities, but seeing one up close was another matter entirely. "Captain," Mara called out from behind him, her tone laced with concern. "We need to move." Cal nodded absently, his gaze still fixed on the girl. "Not without her," he said firmly. Mara frowned. "Sir, she's not part of the mission. We don't even know if she's dangerous." "She's not staying here," Cal interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. Without waiting for a response, he moved toward the girl. Chains rattled as she flinched back instinctively, but when Cal knelt beside her, his expression softened. "I'm not going to hurt you," he murmured, pulling out a cutting tool from his belt. "You're safe now." The girl watched him silently, her glowing eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether she could trust him. When the chains finally fell away, she rubbed her raw wrists and let out a shaky breath. For the first time since entering the outpost, Cal felt a flicker of hope amidst all the chaos. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. With some effort, she rose to her feet, leaning slightly on Cal for support. He motioned for Mara and Jace to cover them as they made their way back toward the extraction point. The journey wasn't easy. Alarms blared throughout the facility as the slavers realized their operation was under attack. Reinforcements poured into the corridors, forcing Cal and his team to fight their way out. Bullets whizzed past, energy blasts scorched the walls, and explosions rocked the station. Through it all, Cal kept the girl close, shielding her from harm whenever possible. At one point, they reached a narrow bridge spanning a chasm filled with molten metal. As they crossed, a volley of gunfire struck the railing, causing the structure to buckle. The girl stumbled, nearly falling, but Cal caught her just in time. For a brief second, their eyes met again, and Kale saw gratitude, and perhaps something deeper, reflected in hers. Finally, they'd reached the rendezvous point where the Eclipse Vanguard awaited. As the ship's ramp lowered, and the team scrambled aboard, Kale glanced back at the crumbling outpost. Explosions tore through the structure, consuming everything in flames. The girl clung tightly to his arm, her breathing uneven but steady. Once aboard, Kale guided her to a seat, ensuring she was secure before turning to address his crew. "Good work today," he said, though his thoughts lingered on the girl. Who was she? What had she endured? And why did saving her feel so important? For now, answers would have to wait. All Kale knew was that he had done the right thing. Little did he realize, however, that this single act of compassion would change the course of his life, and the fate of two species, forever. The Eclipse Vanguard hummed softly as it drifted through the cold, silent void of space. Inside the ship, however, tension crackled like static electricity. Captain Cal Draven sat in the command chair, his fingers tapping absently on the armrest as he stared at the viewscreen displaying endless stars. His mind kept returning to the girl they had rescued, Lyra, as she had introduced herself when they finally coaxed her into speaking. Her voice was soft and melodic, though hesitant, as if she feared every word might bring punishment. Kale sighed and leaned back, rubbing his temples. Bringing Lyra aboard had been instinctual, a gut reaction to protect someone clearly in need, but now reality was setting in. His crew wasn't exactly thrilled about having an alien refugee on board, especially one whose species was shrouded in mystery and superstition. Whispers circulated among them, some curious, others wary. Lieutenant Maravos, ever pragmatic, voiced her concerns during a briefing shortly after their escape. "Sir," Mara began, glancing around the cramped meeting room where the team had gathered, "we don't know anything about her. What if she's dangerous? Or what if her presence draws unwanted attention from other factions?" Corporal Jace Ryn chimed in, crossing his massive arms over his chest. "She doesn't look like much of a threat to me, but I get your point. We're already running low on supplies, and adding another mouth to feed isn't ideal." Kale listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When the murmurs died down, he spoke firmly. "She stays." His tone left no room for argument. "We saved her life, and now we're responsible for her safety. That's not negotiable." Though reluctant, the crew obeyed. Over the next few days, Kale made sure Lyra was comfortable, assigning her a small cabin near Medical Bay so she could recover fully. She spent most of her time alone, curled up on the cot or staring out the tiny porthole window at the stars beyond. Occasionally, Kale would visit, bringing food or checking on her progress. At first, she barely acknowledged him, flinching whenever he approached. But slowly, she began to relax, her glowing eyes following his movements with cautious curiosity. One evening, Kale entered her quarters carrying a tray of warm broth and bread. He set it down on the small table beside her bed and offered a gentle smile. "You should eat something," he said softly. "It'll help you regain your strength." Lyra hesitated before reaching for the bowl. Her hands trembled slightly as she brought it to her lips, sipping carefully. After a moment, she looked up at him, her luminous gaze searching his face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kale nodded, surprised by how much those two simple words meant to him. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I'm just doing what's right." Lyra tilted her head, studying him intently. Then, haltingly, she began to speak again. "Why? Why did you save me?" The question hung heavy in the air, raw and unfiltered. For a moment, Kale didn't answer. He thought back to the horrors he'd witnessed, the countless lives destroyed by greed and cruelty, and realized that saving Lyra had been more than duty. It had been a chance to make things right, even in a small way. "Because no one deserves to suffer like that," he said finally, "and because I believe everyone deserves a second chance." Lyra's bioluminescent markings flickered faintly, as if responding to his words. She lowered her gaze, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. "My people, we are not strong," she admitted quietly. "We do not fight. That is why they took us. They saw us as weak." "They underestimated you," Kale said firmly. "But weakness isn't about power. It's about giving up. You haven't given up, Lyra. That makes you stronger than any weapon." Her eyes widened, and for the first time since coming aboard, a hint of a smile touched her lips. It was fleeting, but it stayed with Kale long after he left her quarters. As the days passed, Lyra grew more confident, venturing out of her room to explore the ship under Cal's watchful eye. She seemed fascinated by everything, from the hum of the engines to the blinking lights on the control panels. The crew remained cautious around her, though some began to warm up to her quiet demeanor. Mara, in particular, found herself intrigued by Lyra's intelligence. During one encounter in the mess hall, Mara struck up a conversation. "So, Lyra," Mara said casually, sliding into the seat across from her, "what were your people like before?" "Well, before all this happened." Lyra paused, considering the question. "We lived simply," she explained, "in harmony with our world. We shared knowledge, stories, songs." Her voice trailed off, tinged with sadness. "Our gifts were meant to heal, to connect, not to harm." "What kind of gifts?" Mara pressed gently. Lyra hesitated, then held out her hand. A faint glow emanated from her palm, casting soft light onto the table. Mara gasped softly, leaning closer. "That's incredible," she breathed. "Can all Luminary do that?" "Some," Lyra replied. "But there are others who can see thoughts, move objects, even glimpse the future." She looked away, her expression troubled. "These abilities made us targets. Humans are not the only ones who fear what they do not understand." Mara frowned, guilt flickering across her face. "Not all humans are like that," she said earnestly. "Some of us, like Cal, he sees the good in people, even when it's hard." Lyra nodded slowly, her glowing eyes meeting Mara's. "He is different," she agreed. There was a depth to her tone that suggested she understood Cal better than anyone else on the ship. Meanwhile, Cal himself wrestled with conflicting emotions. Caring for Lyra reminded him of why he became a soldier, to protect the innocent, but it also forced him to confront his own scars. Memories of battles fought and lives lost haunted him. Yet Lyra's presence brought a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Watching her begin to heal, to trust again, filled him with a quiet pride. One night, as the ship drifted silently through the stars, Cale stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the infinite expanse. Lyra joined him unexpectedly, her footsteps light and almost soundless. She stopped beside him, her glowing form casting a pale light on the metal floor. "You miss it, don't you?" she asked softly, surprising him. "Miss what?" Cale replied, turning to look at her. "Your home," she said simply. "Your people, the life you left behind." Cale chuckled dryly. "Sometimes, but there's no going back, not really. The galaxy has changed too much." Lyra studied him for a moment, then reached out tentatively, placing her hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, comforting. "You gave me hope," she said. "Now perhaps I can give you the same." Cale stared at her, struck by the sincerity in her voice. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of optimism, a fragile, flickering flame that promised brighter days ahead. Whatever challenges lay in store, he knew one thing for certain. Lyra had become more than just a rescued stranger. She was a friend, an ally, and maybe, just maybe, something more. And so, amidst the vastness of space, a bond began to form, delicate yet unbreakable, between two souls from different worlds. Days turned into weeks aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, and life on the ship began to settle into a fragile rhythm. Lyra, once withdrawn and fearful, had started to emerge from her shell, exploring more of the vessel and interacting cautiously with the crew. Her presence brought an unexpected calm to the otherwise tense atmosphere. though whispers of unease still lingered among some members. Despite their initial reservations, many found themselves drawn to her quiet grace and gentle demeanor. Cale noticed subtle changes in her behavior, how she seemed more comfortable walking through the corridors unescorted, how she smiled faintly at familiar faces, and how her bioluminescent patterns shifted in response to emotions. It was as if she were slowly reclaiming pieces of herself, rediscovering who she was beyond the chains that had bound her. But there was something else too, a growing sense of mystery surrounding her abilities. It happened late one night when Cal was reviewing mission logs in his quarters. The soft glow of his console illuminated the room, casting long shadows across the walls. He heard a faint knock at the door and called out for whoever it was to enter. To his surprise, Lyra stepped inside, her luminous form glowing faintly in the dim light. She hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, I need to tell you something." Her tone sent a ripple of concern through him. Setting aside his datapad, he gestured for her to sit. "What is it, Lyra?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "I have seen things," she began haltingly. "Images, feelings. They come to me without warning, like echoes from somewhere far away." Cale frowned, leaning forward. "What kind of images?" Lyra closed her eyes, concentrating. When she opened them again, they burned with intensity. "A fleet, large and dark, filled with malice. They hunt us. They know we are here." The words struck Cal like a blow. "Slavers?" he asked sharply. She nodded. "Yes, and they are close. Closer than you think." For a moment, Cale sat in stunned silence. Could he trust what she was saying? Visions and premonitions weren't unheard of among certain alien species, but they were often dismissed as superstition. Yet, looking into Lyra's wide, earnest eyes, he couldn't dismiss her warning so easily. There was conviction in her voice, a certainty that went beyond mere speculation. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" he asked gently, trying not to sound accusatory. "I wasn't sure," she admitted. "These visions, they are new to me. My people rarely use such gifts, fearing their power. But now, I cannot ignore them. You must believe me, Captain. Danger is coming." Cale stood abruptly, pacing the length of the room as he processed her words. If Lyra's vision was accurate, and his instincts told him it might be, they were in serious trouble. The slavers wouldn't stop until they reclaimed their prize, and the Eclipse Vanguard was no match for an entire fleet. Summoning his senior officers to the briefing room, Cal shared Lyra's warning. Predictably, skepticism greeted him. Mara raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms over her chest. "Are we really basing our strategy on psychic dreams now?" "It's not just a dream," Cal countered firmly. "We've seen what these slavers are capable of. Do you want to wait until they're breathing down our necks to act?" Jace grunted, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "If she's right, we need to prepare for the worst. That means rerouting power to weapon systems and plotting an escape route." "And if she's wrong," Mara pressed, "we'll waste resources and risk tipping off whoever might actually be following us." Cale clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "We don't have time to debate this. Either we take precautions or we gamble with our lives. Which is it going to be?" After a tense pause, Jace nodded. "Let's prep the ship. Better safe than sorry." As the team dispersed to carry out their tasks, Cale returned to Lyra, finding her waiting anxiously in the corridor outside the briefing room. Her markings pulsed faintly, betraying her nervousness. "Did they believe me?" she asked softly. "They're taking your warning seriously," Cale replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's all that matters." Over the next few hours, the crew worked tirelessly to fortify the ship. Weapons systems were recalibrated, shields reinforced, and escape routes plotted. Meanwhile, Lyra retreated to her quarters, overwhelmed by the weight of her revelation. She sat cross-legged on her cot, focusing inward, trying to make sense of the fragmented images flooding her mind. The fleet was vast, its ships bristling with armaments. She could feel their hatred, their hunger for vengeance. It terrified her, but it also fueled her determination to protect those who had saved her. When the alarm finally blared, shattering the uneasy calm aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, everyone sprang into action. Through the view screen, Cal watched as a massive formation of slaver vessels emerged from hyperspace, their ominous silhouettes blotting out the stars. His heart sank. Lyra's vision had been accurate after all. All hands, battle stations. Cal barked, gripping the edge of his command chair. Mara, get us moving. Jace, man the cannons. The ship rocked violently as enemy fire rained down, forcing the crew to scramble. Explosions lit up the void outside, and alarms screamed through the corridors. Amidst the chaos, Lyra appeared on the bridge, her face pale but resolute. "Let me help," she said firmly, stepping toward Cal. "You can't." He started to protest, but she cut him off. "You trusted me enough to listen. Trust me now." Before Cal could argue further, Lyra closed her eyes and raised her hands. A wave of energy surged outward, enveloping the ship in a shimmering barrier that deflected incoming attacks. The crew stared in awe as the barrage of enemy fire dissipated harmlessly against the shield. Lyra's body trembled with effort, sweat beading on her forehead, but she held firm, her focus unwavering. "Keep firing," Cal shouted, seizing the opportunity. "We've got them on the ropes." Under Lyra's protection, the Eclipse Vanguard retaliated fiercely, targeting key points on the lead slaver vessel. Plasma bolts streaked through space, striking home with devastating precision. One by one, the enemy ships faltered, their formations crumbling under the relentless assault. But the victory came at a cost. As the last slaver ship retreated into hyperspace, Lyra collapsed to her knees, her strength spent. Her bioluminescent markings flickered weakly, and her breathing grew labored. Cal rushed to her side, lifting her gently into his arms. "You did it," he murmured, cradling her against his chest. "You saved us." Lyra managed a faint smile, her voice barely audible. "I promised. I would protect you." Her exhaustion was palpable, but there was no mistaking the pride in her eyes. In that moment, Cal realized just how much she had grown, not just as a survivor, but as someone willing to fight for others despite her own fears. Her actions had proven beyond doubt that she was no longer just a rescued stranger. She was a vital part of the crew, and perhaps even more. As the ship limped away from the battlefield, battered but victorious, Cal made a silent vow. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would stand by Lyra's side, just as she had stood by his. Their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, had become unbreakable, and it was only the beginning of their journey together. The aftermath of the battle left the Eclipse Vanguard battered and bruised, its once pristine hull scorched with plasma burns, and its systems strained to their limits. Smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of burnt circuits and melted metal. The crew moved quickly through the corridors, assessing damage and tending to injuries. Despite the chaos, there was a palpable sense of relief. They had survived against overwhelming odds, thanks in no small part to Lyra. Cal stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen as the slaver fleet disappeared into the void. His hands gripped the railing tightly, knuckles white from the strain. He replayed the events in his mind. The relentless barrage of enemy fire, the desperate maneuvers to evade destruction, and most of all, Lyra's selfless act. She had shielded them all, channeling an energy that defied explanation, but it had clearly taken a toll on her. Even now, she lay unconscious in the medical bay, her body frail and fragile beneath the sterile glow of diagnostic lights. Mara approached him cautiously, her expression grim. "Captain," she said softly, "we've patched up the worst of the damage, but the ship's not going to hold together for much longer without repairs. We need to find a safe port soon." Cal nodded absently, his thoughts still consumed by Lyra. "How is she?" he asked, his voice heavy with concern. She's stable for now, Mara replied. But using that kind of power, it's like she burned herself out. I don't know how long it'll take for her to recover, or if she even can fully recover. Kale sighed deeply, rubbing a hand over his face. She saved us, Mara. Without her, we'd be floating debris right now. I'm not saying she didn't, Mara countered gently. But you have to ask yourself, what happens next? Her powers are incredible, yes, but they're also dangerous. If word gets out about what she can do. Kale cut her off with a sharp look. We're not handing her over to anyone. Not after everything she's been through. She stays with us. Mara held up her hands in surrender. I'm just saying, we need to think ahead. People will come looking for her, whether it's the slavers or someone worse. And when they find her, they won't hesitate to use her or destroy her. Kale clenched his jaw, knowing Mara was right. But the thought of abandoning Lyra, or worse, hiding her away, felt wrong. She had risked everything to protect them, and he owed her the same loyalty in return. Still, he couldn't deny the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Protecting her meant more than keeping her safe. It meant preparing her, and the crew, for whatever came next. Hours later, Lyra stirred awake in the medical bay. Her glowing patterns flickered weakly, casting faint light across the room. Kale sat beside her bed, watching silently as she opened her eyes. For a moment, confusion clouded her features before recognition dawned, and she smiled faintly. You're safe, Kale said softly, leaning closer. You did good out there, Lyra. Real good. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of guilt. I wasn't strong enough, she whispered. If I had been stronger, maybe none of this would have happened. That's not true, Kale insisted firmly. You gave us a fighting chance when we didn't have one. You saved everyone on this ship. But at what cost? Lyra murmured, her voice tinged with sadness. My people, we were taught to fear our gifts because they could hurt others. Now I see why. Power like mine, it comes with consequences. Kale hesitated, unsure how to respond. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that she had nothing to feel guilty about, but he knew she needed time to process everything. Instead, he reached out and placed a hand on hers. Whatever happens next, you're not alone. We'll figure this out together. Lyra looked at him, her luminous eyes searching his face. There was gratitude there, but also something deeper, a quiet determination. Thank you, she said simply, for believing in me. As the days passed, tensions aboard the ship began to rise. News of the battle spread quickly through encrypted channels, drawing attention from factions both friendly and hostile. Some hailed the Eclipse Vanguard as heroes, while others viewed them as threats. Among these factions were representatives of Lyra's own species, who reached out via subspace communication demanding answers. They want her back, Mara reported during a briefing. Said they've been searching for survivors of her kind for years. They claim they can help her control her abilities. Kale frowned, suspicion creeping into his mind. And what happens if we refuse? They didn't say, Mara admitted, but it doesn't sound like they're asking nicely. Jace leaned forward, cracking his knuckles. Sounds like a trap to me. Hand her over, and they'll lock her up in some lab somewhere, poking and prodding until they drain every last drop of energy from her. We can't ignore them completely, Mara argued. They might actually be able to help her. We don't know anything about her powers, or how to keep her safe. Kale listened silently, weighing their arguments. On one side, there was the risk of handing Lyra over to strangers who may or may not have her best interests at heart. On the other, there was the danger of staying isolated, vulnerable to attacks from enemies eager to exploit her abilities. Either choice carried risks, but only one felt right. Let's hear her out, Kale decided finally. It's her life or decision. We give her the facts and let her choose. When Kale explained the situation to Lyra, she listened intently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she sat quietly for a long moment, her glowing patterns dimming slightly. I don't want to go back, she said finally, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. My people abandoned me once. Why should I trust them now? Kale nodded, understanding her hesitation. Then we stay together. We'll find another way. Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining with unused tears. Why do you care so much? After everything I've put you through. Because you matter, Kale replied simply. You've shown me what courage looks like, Lyra. And I'm not letting you face this alone. Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. Then I will stay, she said firmly. With you. The decision brought a renewed sense of purpose to the crew. Though challenges loomed ahead, repairing the ship, evading pursuers, and protecting Lyra, they faced them with unity and resolve. Together, they formed a bond stronger than any weapon, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by trust. As the Eclipse Vanguard drifted toward the edge of known space, Lyra stood beside Kale on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless stars. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, filled with dangers beyond imagining. But for the first time in her life, she felt a spark of hope, a fragile flame nurtured by the man standing beside her. What happens now? She asked softly. Kale smiled faintly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We keep moving forward, no matter what. And with those words, they stepped boldly into the unknown, ready to face whatever trials awaited them. The decision to stay together brought a fragile peace aboard the Eclipse Vanguard, but it also opened the door to new challenges. Lyra's declaration that she wanted to remain with Kale, and her growing affection for him, was met with mixed reactions from both the crew and the wider universe. For Kale, the weight of responsibility grew heavier with each passing day. He knew their bond was unusual, even unprecedented, and he couldn't ignore the complications it might bring. Lyra herself seemed torn between gratitude and guilt. She had found safety and purpose among the humans, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was straddling two worlds without truly belonging to either. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically as she wrestled with these thoughts, a visual manifestation of her inner turmoil. Kale noticed her unease during one of their quiet moments on the observation deck. You've been quiet lately, he said gently, leaning against the railing beside her. What's on your mind? Lyra hesitated before responding, her glowing eyes reflecting the distant stars. I feel caught between paths, she admitted softly. My people would never understand this life I've chosen. And yet, I cannot imagine leaving you, or this ship. Kale nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's not easy being caught in the middle, but you don't have to figure everything out right now. Take it one step at a time. Her lips curved into a faint smile. You always say that. One step at a time. Do you really believe it works? I do, Kale replied firmly. Because every journey starts somewhere. And yours began when you decided to trust me. Though comforting, his words did little to ease the external pressures mounting around them. News of Lyra's existence and her extraordinary abilities spread quickly through interstellar networks, sparking debates across human and alien communities alike. Some viewed her as a beacon of hope, proof that cooperation between species was possible. Others saw her as a threat, an anomaly whose powers could destabilize entire systems if left unchecked. Among the loudest voices were xenophobic factions within human space. These groups, already distrustful of alien influence, seized upon Lyra's presence as evidence of humanity's decline. Protests erupted outside government buildings, demanding stricter regulations on interspecies contact. Media outlets amplified their rhetoric, painting Lyra as a dangerous outsider who needed to be contained or eliminated. Things are getting worse out there, Mara reported grimly during a briefing. There's talk of forming a coalition to hunt us down. They're calling us traitors for harboring her. Kale clenched his jaw, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. We're not handing her over to anyone. Not while I'm still breathing. That's noble, sir, Jace chimed in, crossing his arms over his chest. But how long can we keep running? Sooner or later, they'll catch up to us. We'll deal with that when it happens, Kale snapped, though he knew Jace had a point. Running wasn't a permanent solution, but neither was standing still. Meanwhile, representatives of Lyra's dwindling species reached out again, this time with renewed urgency. Their messages carried a tone of desperation, urging her to return and help rebuild what remained of her culture. When Kale relayed their plea to Lyra, she listened silently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "They say my gifts could heal our world," she murmured after a long pause. "That I am needed." Kale studied her carefully, searching for signs of hesitation. "Do you want to go back?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "No, my home is gone. Even if I returned, I wouldn't recognize it anymore. This ship, you've given me something I never thought I'd find again, a place where I belong." Her words struck a chord deep within Kale, filling him with a mix of pride and protectiveness. Yet he couldn't ignore the complexity of their situation. If they were to build a future together, they needed to navigate the cultural divide between them, a task easier said than done. To complicate matters further, rumors of their relationship began circulating among the crew. While some accepted it as inevitable, others whispered warnings about the risks of such a union. Lieutenant Maravos confronted Cal privately, her concern evident. "Sir, I get it. You care about her. We all see that. But interspecies relationships are rare for a reason. Different lifespans, customs, expectations. It's messy. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Kale sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know, Mara. Honestly, I don't. But I do know that walking away isn't an option. Not for me, and not for her." Mara frowned but nodded reluctantly. "Just be careful, okay? The galaxy has a way of punishing those who break its rules." As tensions escalated externally, Kale and Lyra focused on strengthening their bond internally. They spent hours talking, sharing stories of their respective cultures, and learning from each other. Kale marveled at the depth of Lyra's knowledge, her people's traditions of harmony with nature, their emphasis on collective well-being over individual gain. In turn, Lyra listened intently as Kale described Earth's history, its struggles and triumphs, and the resilience that defined humanity. One evening, as they sat together in the mess hall, Lyra reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her touch was warm, reassuring. "You asked me once why I stayed," she said softly. "The truth is, I love you, Kale. Not because of what you've done for me, but because of who you are." Kale felt his breath catch in his throat. Love was a word he hadn't allowed himself to consider, not since the war had stripped him of so much. Yet hearing it now, spoken with such sincerity, filled him with a sense of wonder and purpose. He squeezed her hand gently, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "I love you too, Lyra. More than I ever thought possible." Their confession marked a turning point, not just for them, but for the crew as well. Though skepticism lingered, many began to see their relationship not as a liability, but as a symbol of unity, a testament to the idea that compassion transcended boundaries. Still, the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, as the Eclipse vanguard drifted deeper into uncharted territory. Avoiding hostile forces while seeking allies, Cal and Lyra prepared to face whatever trials awaited them, together. Their bond, forged in fire and tempered by trust, had become unbreakable. And though the galaxy loomed large and unpredictable, they faced it side by side, ready to carve their own path forward. For now, that was enough. The decision to seek answers, and perhaps reconciliation, led Kale and Lyra on a perilous journey toward her homeworld. It was a bold move, one that carried immense risks, but also the promise of closure. Lyra's memories of her planet were fragmented, blurred by years of captivity and trauma, but she clung to them like lifelines. She described lush forests glowing faintly under twin moons, rivers that shimmered with bioluminescent algae, and cities built into towering crystalline structures that pulsed softly with light. To Kale, it sounded almost mythical, a paradise lost to time and tragedy. As the Eclipse Vanguard charted its course through treacherous hyperspace routes, Kale prepared his crew for what lay ahead. "We don't know what we're walking into," he warned during a briefing. "Her people might welcome us, or they might see us as invaders. We need to be ready for anything." Mara nodded, her expression grim. "And if they try to take her from us?" "They won't," Kale replied firmly. "Not unless she wants to go. This trip is about giving her choices, not taking them away." Though the crew respected his resolve, tension simmered beneath the surface. Jace voiced concerns about potential hostility, while others worried about the ship's deteriorating condition. The battle against the slavers had left the Eclipse Vanguard barely operational, and every jump through hyperspace pushed its systems closer to failure. Yet despite these challenges, no one questioned the mission's importance, not when it meant helping Lyra reclaim a piece of herself. Lyra spent much of the voyage in quiet contemplation, often retreating to the observation deck to gaze at the stars streaking past. Her glowing patterns flickered with emotion, betraying the turmoil within. Kale joined her frequently, offering silent support. One evening, as they stood side by side watching the galaxy blur into streaks of light, Lyra spoke softly. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What if they reject me? What if I don't belong there anymore?" Kale turned to face her, his gray eyes filled with understanding. "You'll always belong somewhere, Lyra, even if it's not where you expect. And no matter what happens, you'll still have us. You're not alone in this." Her lips curved into a faint smile, gratitude shining in her luminous eyes. "You make it sound so simple." "It doesn't have to be complicated," Kale replied gently. "Sometimes, all we need is courage to keep moving forward." When they finally reached Lyra's homeworld, the sight took their breath away. The planet hung in space like a jewel, its surface awash with vibrant colors that shifted and danced under the light of two suns. Towering crystalline spires rose from verdant plains, their surfaces refracting sunlight into dazzling rainbows. Rivers snaked across the landscape, their waters glowing faintly with the same bioluminescence that marked Lyra's skin. It was beautiful, but hauntingly empty. As the Eclipse Vanguard entered orbit, scans revealed signs of devastation. Cities lay in ruins, their once brilliant structures reduced to jagged skeletons. Vast swaths of forest had been scorched black, and rivers ran sluggish and dark. Whatever catastrophe had befallen this world, it had left deep scars. "This wasn't natural," Mara murmured, studying the readings. "Looks like orbital bombardment. Someone wanted to wipe them out completely." Kale clenched his jaw, anger flaring within him. Whoever did this, they didn't just destroy buildings or ecosystems. They tried to erase an entire culture. Lyra stared silently at the view screen, tears glistening in her eyes. For a moment, Kale feared she might retreat into herself again, overwhelmed by the loss. But instead, she straightened, determination hardening her features. "We need to land," she said firmly. "There may still be survivors." Touching down near one of the ruined cities, the crew disembarked cautiously, weapons drawn. The air was thick with ash and the scent of decay, and the silence was deafening. As they explored the crumbling streets, evidence of the attack became clearer. Shattered homes, charred remains, and remnants of desperate last stands. Yet amidst the destruction, they found traces of hope. In a sheltered alcove beneath a collapsed building, they discovered a small group of survivors. Gaunt and weary, they huddled together, their glowing patterns dimmed by exhaustion. When they saw Lyra, shock rippled through their ranks, followed by disbelief, and then joy. "Lyra," an elder woman whispered, stepping forward hesitantly. "Is it really you?" Lyra froze, recognition dawning slowly. "Auntie Lyra," she breathed, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her face as she rushed forward, embracing the woman tightly. Around them, the other survivors gathered, murmuring in awe. Word spread quickly through the hidden enclave. One of their own had returned. Over the next few days, Kale and his crew worked alongside the survivors to assess the damage and begin rebuilding efforts. Lyra immersed herself in the task, reconnecting with her people and sharing stories of her journey. At first, some viewed her relationship with Kale with suspicion, unsure how to reconcile her bond with a human. But as they witnessed her happiness and Kale's unwavering support, they began to accept it, even celebrate it. One evening, gathered around a communal fire, the elders approached Kale and Lyra. Their leader, a frail yet dignified man named Elder Torin, addressed them solemnly. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," he said, bowing slightly. "Your actions have reignited hope in our hearts. But tell me, what will you do now? Will you stay, Lyra, or continue your journey?" Lyra looked at Kale, her glowing eyes reflecting her conflict. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. "I want to help rebuild, but I cannot abandon my family aboard the Eclipse Vanguard. My place is with both of you, with all of you." Elder Torin nodded approvingly. "Then let us work together. Your bond with Captain Draven proves that unity is possible, even across stars. Perhaps through you, we can forge a new path, not just for ourselves, but for all species." Kale smiled faintly, placing a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "We'll stand beside you. Together, we'll create something stronger than what was lost." As the weeks passed, progress was slow but steady. The survivors began restoring their city, guided by Lyra's vision of harmony and cooperation. Meanwhile, Kale and his crew served as mediators, bridging gaps between humans and Luminary. Though challenges remained, the threat of slavers, resource shortages, lingering distrust, the foundation for peace had been laid. For Lyra, the journey home had brought both pain and healing. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and discovered a new purpose. And though her future was uncertain, one thing was clear: wherever she went, she would carry the love and strength of those who stood by her. Together, Kale and Lyra prepared to leave the planet temporarily, vowing to return with supplies and allies. As the Eclipse Vanguard lifted off, Lyra gazed out the viewport at her homeworld, now bathed in the golden glow of dawn. Though scared, it was alive. And so was she. With Kale at her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Their story was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like they were truly writing it together. The Eclipsed Vanguard soared through the stars once more, its mission renewed and its purpose clearer than ever. Kale stood on the bridge, his hands resting lightly on the railing as he gazed out at the endless expanse of space. Behind him, Lyra watched quietly, her glowing patterns pulsing softly with contentment. The journey back to her homeworld had been fraught with challenges, but it had also brought unexpected triumphs. Bridges built, lives saved, and hope kindled where despair had once reigned. As they traveled toward a nearby human colony to gather supplies and allies, Kale found himself reflecting on how far they'd come. When he first rescued Lyra from the slavers, he hadn't imagined their bond would grow so deep, or that it would inspire change across two species. Yet here they were, standing side by side, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Their arrival at the human colony was met with mixed reactions. Some residents greeted them warmly, eager to hear tales of their adventures and marvel at Lyra's luminous presence. Others eyed her warily, their distrust fueled by years of propaganda painting aliens as threats rather than allies. But Kale refused to let fear dictate their welcome. With Lyra at his side, he addressed the colonists during an impromptu gathering in the central square. "This isn't just my story," Kale began, his voice steady and commanding. "It's ours, a testament to what happens when we choose compassion over hatred, understanding over fear. Lyra represents not only her people but also the possibility of unity between our species. Together, we can build something stronger than division." Lyra stepped forward then, her glowing eyes meeting those of the crowd. Her voice was soft yet firm as she spoke. "I know many of you have suffered because of conflict. My people have too. But suffering doesn't have to define us. We can heal together. Her words resonated deeply, especially among the younger generation who had grown tired of cycles of violence. Slowly, skepticism gave way to curiosity, and hostility softened into cautious acceptance. By the time they departed, the colony had pledged support, not just in resources, but in spreading their message of cooperation. With reinforcements aboard and supplies replenished, the Eclipse Vanguard returned to Lyra's homeworld. The survivors greeted them like heroes, their gratitude evident in every gesture and smile. Progress had continued in their absence. Fields were being replanted, damaged structures repaired, and communal spaces restored. But there was still much work to be done, and Kel's crew threw themselves into the effort alongside the luminary. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the community gathered for a celebration. Music filled the air, blending melodic chants with rhythmic beats played on instruments carved from crystal. Dancers moved gracefully under strings of glowing lanterns, their bioluminescent patterns shimmering in harmony with the music. Laughter echoed through the night, a sound that hadn't been heard in years. Amidst the festivities, Elder Torin approached Kale and Lyra, his expression solemn yet warm. "Tonight, we honor not just survival but renewal," he said, raising the ceremonial goblet. "And no one embodies that spirit more than the two of you." Kale glanced at Lyra, who smiled shyly before speaking. "We didn't do this alone," she replied. "Every person here played a part. This is your victory as much as ours." The elder nodded approvingly, then turned to address the crowd. "Let us celebrate not only what has been rebuilt, but what will come next. Tonight, we mark the beginning of a new era, an era defined by unity and hope." As cheers erupted around them, Kale felt a sense of peace settle over him. For so long, he had carried the weight of loss and regret, believing himself incapable of finding happiness again. But Lyra had shown him otherwise. She had taught him that even amidst destruction, beauty could bloom, and that love transcended boundaries. Later that night, as the celebration wound down, Kale and Lyra retreated to a quiet hill overlooking the city. The ruins still stood as reminders of the past, but now they were framed by signs of life. New growth sprouting from cracks in the earth, lights flickering in repaired homes, and laughter drifting on the breeze.